You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington. Welcome everyone to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington. I am your host, Dumisani, Washington. So great to be with you on this Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Those of you listening on the WNEW HD3 FM 102.7 in the New York metro area, so glad to be with you. So glad to be a part of this family on HD3 FM 102.7. Again, another shout out, especially to those behind the scenes. I say another because I've given them some before this actual show got started. But those of you, you know who you are at the FM 102.7 HD3. We really appreciate you all. Our staff as well for doing all the things that were necessary in order for us to begin this journey together. Again, make yourself comfortable. Come on in as we start this maiden voyage. I am, again, Dumisani, Washington. I'm a husband, father, pastor, educator, and so glad to be able to have these conversations with you. Now, when we put out the promos for the show, if you haven't heard about it at all, you can go to ttplive.com. TTP Live, as in Truth to Power Live, ttplive.com, and you can listen to the streaming there online. We'll also be on different platforms. We should be on X right now as well, and some others. But you'll also see a Substack that says Join Dumisani Substack. It is the second Substack that I'm associated with. Another one is with another hat that I wear. I am on top of the other things that I shared with you, husband, father, and pastor, musician, all of those things. I'm also the founder and the CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Also an author of a book called Zionism in the Black Church, Why Standing with Israel Will Be a Defining Issue for Christians of Color in the 21st Century. Those topics alone take a lot to unpack, and we will be able to do that hopefully over these next several weeks and months. Again, looking forward to just having that conversation with you. When we put out the promos, as I was saying, we talked about, I didn't even count it, right? It was 12 different areas that it wound up being different topics of discussion, including the Bible, music, politics, culture, the Black American community, current events, geopolitics, Israel, Africa, marriage, family, education, and even much more than that. And so today, we'll have the opportunity to unpack a few of those on that list. And again, hopefully going forward, we'll go even further into other ones. And why hold that Zionism, the Black Church? What is this Black, Jewish, Africa, Israel thing that we'll be unpacking? There is such a both spiritual and also cultural relationship when it comes to the Black and Jewish community. And we say it like that. Jews are black, white, and brown. We're not talking about Jews that because they're not black, we're saying black and Jewish. What we're saying is we're talking about culturally. We're talking about historically, especially in the United States. There's a part of my book, Zionism in the Black Church, that deals almost exclusively with Negro spirituals, the songs that were from the slave past and through the whole time of Jim Crow segregation, the songs that were sung, that were religious, that were based in the scriptures. Much of those spirituals often based on what we as Christians call the Old Testament, what our Jewish brothers and sisters call the Tanakh, also in the New Testament as well, obviously. So there's different discussions that we've had around those because they're deep and pervasive, right? It is not just a cursory glance that one can take to truly understand. And again, we'll be able to discuss those here going forward. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of topics today that you and I will begin to unpack a little bit. One of those will be family. On this Father's Day, there's a special thing that we'll do here. Shout out to our friends in New York here, the David and Goliath Project, Mr. David K. Amazing people, do a lot of different things in terms of media and everything. We came together about a year ago and began to do a series of YouTube videos called The Superhero Show. And it is actually kind of based on a sermon that I had preached. Some of them had kind of heard it, and I talked about being descended from superheroes, talking specifically in the context of Black American history, from slavery, centuries of slavery, another century of Jim Crow segregation, still built Black Wall Street, still built Tuskegee Institute, still built Harlem Renaissance, Black soldiers fighting for their own freedoms, homes, families, businesses, all of these things for people who weren't supposed to even survive any of those things, survived and thrived. And I was making the statement to someone in the context of that, saying that I descended, meaning as a Black American, from superheroes. And that's not a supremacist thing at all. This is not about a Black American culture or community being above or better than or anything like that, someone else's culture or community. What it is one in which what we often talk about, both in our organization, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, and that I've talked about for years in my ministry, in that if we don't, as a people, whoever we are, ethnically, religiously, don't understand our history, don't understand our legacy, our heritage, then we don't truly understand where we are at this moment in time. And there's so much that's going on, so much upheaval in our nation, so many forces that want to destroy this vibrant democracy that is still the hope of so many people from all over the world. They come here for better life, for freedom. And so there's a real battle that is happening here in our nation to destroy that nation. And that those forces often try to use the Black community, the community that I'm from and I love, try to use that voice in a very, very wrong way. So we'll be able to discuss those things together too. So the Bible is the first thing that's mentioned. And as my producers I'm kind of watching them, and I'm also watching clock thing because I've done podcast stuff before, but radio first time. So I got to watch out for hard stops and different commercial announcements and everything. So you have to bear with me as I'm getting used to the different format and everything. The Bible, again, as a pastor, as a husband and father, became a Christian at a very young age. During grade school, I'm not sure exactly how old now. Was I 8, 9, or 10? I don't remember when I gave my heart to the Lord. And was raised as a Baptist. My parents are from the segregated South. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in the late 1960s. My father moved our family, me and my 6 siblings, to San Francisco, which is where I grew up. I grew up between San Francisco and Stockton, California. Shout out to all my family out there in Northern California. And so that was those formative years were church, were worship and gospel music, education. My family, again, very proud Black folk from the segregated South. And I learned much of that experience from my mother in particular, who was a graduate of Scipio A. Jones High School in North Little Rock. That school does not exist as a institution still. There are alumni that they still come together. I had the honor of speaking at one of their engagements years ago, actually the year that my mother passed away, 2002. The Scipio A. Jones High School Alumni Association, they have a biannual reunion. They have one in the Bay Area, and then in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then one in the Little Rock area. If they are still doing that, I'm not sure. They were doing that for many years. And I was honored to be the keynote speaker in 2002, June of 2002. This month was that 22 years ago. It was the joy of my life to address people that were my parents' age and older, how they honored me to come and speak there. I learned so much about the school, and from that lens, learned so much about whether you want to call it the civil rights movement, what you want to talk about the Black American experience in terms of education, all of those things. I learned about those things at home long before getting to school. As a child, my mother would talk to me about those things: segregation, integration, what the civil rights movement she felt got right, what it got wrong in terms of the debates that were being had internally, what the actual focus was, what the impetus was at first, and how that politically began to shift and all those. We'll be able to discuss those. Again, I talk about much of this in my book, Zionism in the Black Church. And if I didn't mention it already, if you want to get it, it's ibsi.org. Go to our other nonprofit organization, ibsi.org, click on store, and you can check out Zionism in the Black Church. It's on different platforms as well. There's the audio book. There's the paperback. There you can get it on Kindle, your different e-readers, everything. And so we unpack some of those things in that book as well. So Bible being the foundation of much of what we discuss, but it goes in much of different directions, right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the journey with you. Again, I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully there'll be some things that you feel that you've learned. I definitely want to hear from you. Not only can you go to ttplive.com and check out more information as we're still putting that on the site. You can also email us at ttplive.com. I'm sorry, info@ttplive.com, info@ttplive.com. You can ask questions, make your comments. Again, love to hear from you. One of the things that comes to mind when we're now on Father's Day, as we're just opening up here before this first commercial break, is that the Word of God says children are an inheritance from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is His reward. My wife and I, again, of 35, almost 36 years, just in a few days, are very grateful for our 6 children, very grateful for our 3 grandchildren. As a matter of fact, they'll all be coming together, visiting home in a few days as it's around our 36th wedding anniversary. Wasn't planned, right? One of the reasons I'm such a blessed man and so grateful is that our adult children from 34 to 24, we have a relationship with them, and we love and like each other, right? We love to be together, right? So when they get the opportunity, they're very busy in their lives. Some of them married, some of them with children. They come home when they can, and just so happens that they're all descending homeward around our anniversary. So we're so excited about that. And looking forward to sharing a great time with them. So we're coming up on a break here. We're going to unpack a couple of those things that's on that list. One of those is fathers. There's a specific thing in terms of fathers that we'll talk about here, not just black fathers, but fathers in general and family. And then the other thing that we'll talk about today before we're done is the African Jewish Alliance. There's actually something called the African Jewish Alliance. You can go to the africanjewishalliance.org, find out more about that. But I'll have more to say about that when it comes to the Israel-Africa Alliance and what this actually means in terms of standing with Israel and standing against the extremism that we see happening more in a minute.
Hey, baseball fans, looking for unique and inspiring experience? Visit the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center in Little Falls, New Jersey. Dive into the legacy of one of baseball's greatest legends, Yogi Berra. Explore his 10 World Series championships, personal memorabilia, and countless inspiring stories. Discover interactive exhibits, educational programs, and special events for all fans of all ages. Perfect for families, school trips, and anyone who loves the game. Come celebrate the life and career of Yogi Berra at the Yogi Berra Museum. For more info and tickets, visit yogiberramuseum.org. Don't miss out on this grand slam of an experience.
Are you ready to take charge of your health and well-being? UK Health Radio is your ultimate digital destination for cutting-edge health information and inspiration. At UK Health Radio, we know that good health is not merely the absence of disease, but a state of complete physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Tune in to our wide range of expert-led shows where renowned health professionals share about the latest research, practical tips, and inspiring stories that will motivate you to live your healthiest life. Don't settle for anything less than vibrant health. Tune in to ukhealthradio.com, the world's #1 talk health radio and podcast platform.
You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington.
Go to ttplive.com. Again, ttplive.com. You can follow us there. You can join our Substack. You can listen to it live there, streaming there on the website as well. So I said in the first segment that we would get into 2 different subject matters, if you will, on today. One of those being fathers, the other one's being the African Jewish Alliance. So let me do this now and set this up. I may have mentioned already that I did a series of videos with our partners out of the David and Goliath project called the Superheroes Show. And in that, I think it was episode 4 is entitled Fathers. Something that I had written about in the past and spoken on both in church and different venues. But we looked in that particular video, and you can go to Superheroes Show. It's on YouTube and it's on Instagram. Superheroes Show. You see this black and red kind of logo that's on there. You can also type my name in there, Dumisani, Washington. It should come up. I believe episode 4. We've done on about 8 episodes, 7 or 8 episodes. We're going to be resuming more episodes about the superheroes, the whole concept of descending from superheroes. We will do that more later on this year. Looking forward to connecting with our crew there. We shoot it in New Jersey. But episode 4, we discussed fathers in the context of 2 different cultural mediums, if you will. One was movie, one was television. The television show was Good Times. Ironically, there's been a new iteration of Good Times on Netflix, which I've dealt with that as well. As a matter of fact, our organization, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, dealt with that. Not a fan. We took it to task. And if you know about the show that debuted in 1974, starring Esther Roll and John Amos and this great cast, it was the only black sitcom that featured an intact nuclear family, a husband, wife, and children, set in Chicago. It ran for about 6 years. And in the video that we did on the Superheroes Show, again on YouTube and on IG, we discussed how John Amos's character, who was James Evans, he played James Evans, the father, was killed off of the show. And there was disputes. We even put a clip in there from the video, I think it's on Vlad TV, when John Amos is talking about how he butt heads with Norman Lear and the writing staff. He had his concept about what he said a black father would say and do, and his was based in experience. The other writers apparently were not African-American or did not have a purview that both John Amos and Esther Roll felt was extremely important. It was important to these main characters, the stars of the show, by their own admission. They talked about how important it was for people to see a black family in a reality, and that was not some sort of stereotype, some sort of negative stereotype, right? And when you consider that it's 1974, and up to that point with all the film and cinema and television, there had never been a intact black family, particularly in television, right? This hadn't happened. This was 10 years before the Cosby Show would air in mid-1980s, right? So, well, that's what I make a mental note for myself. One of my friends said, Dumisani, you say right all the time. You got to stop saying that. So I'm saying it out loud now. Y'all can help me too. info@ttplive.com. If I'm saying it too much or if I'm saying it at all, just remind it, brother. Gotta stop saying that. So we talked about that show and the significance of the father being removed from the show. And again, as I said in the video, that's not uncommon. Actors leave shows, right? But usually, I said right, what usually happens, particularly in a sitcom, is someone else is hired to play that role. When they removed John Amos from the show, they never replaced him with another father. The rest of the show, the rest of the 3 years plus of the show, it played out with Esther Roll, her Florida Evans, as a single black mom, which is what the show Julia was back, I believe, in the late 1960s, starring Diane Carroll, which ironically is the star of the other thing that we talked about, the movie Claudia, starring Diane Carroll and James Earl Jones, and the oldest sibling, I believe, is Lawrence Hilton Jacobs. So we start the video of that superhero show with an actual clip of then Senator Barack Obama at what was Father's Day, around Father's Day, 2008. He's speaking at the Apostolic Church of God in Chicago, and his message is to fathers. And in this message, again, June 2008, he cites statistics that have been known for decades at this point, particularly since the Moynihan Report of 1965, in which Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was the Assistant Secretary of Labor for the Labor Department, the assistant for the Labor Department, sorry about that, he discussed and began to sound alarm bells regarding what he saw and was true, the deterioration of the black family, which had been the most solid since the end of the Civil War. By the 1960s, economists, including the great Thomas Sowell, had actually cited that the marriage rate for black families, mothers and fathers raising children, was nearly 90%. And it was slowly beginning to go in the wrong direction, even by the mid-1960s. I don't remember the exact percentage here at the moment. Please forgive me. But the percentage today, as I cite in the piece that you're going to see a little bit of in a second here, is 70+% black children raised without a mother and father married to each other. Yes, that matters. Yes, engaged fathers is important. Single parents, amazing. They do an amazing job. Single moms, single dads. Citing marriage statistics is in no way a dismissal of those single parents who are out there on the grind doing an amazing job. They're doing a job that's meant for two. It's one of them in this Herculean effort. This is not about whether or not those single parents deserve praise and to be lauded and applauded. That is not the point. The point is that the child fares the best when he or she is raised by their mother and their father. We have all the stats. And again, Barack Obama cites some of those stats. Take a look at this clip for me.
We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teen parents because the father wasn't in the home. The foundations of our community and our country are weaker because of this.
It's at that point in Obama's speech, his sermon on that day, that he goes on to cite in 2008 that over half of black children are born and raised in families where there is no father. And then we go on to say that between then, 2008, and now, that percentage is now more around 70%. And contrasting that, as I said, that back when you go just a few decades back, 1960, it was nearly 80% of black children who were raised by mothers and fathers, right? Proving the resiliency of the black family that endured the scourge that was now post-Civil War, but the Jim Crow segregation and the validated, real, excruciating, systemic racism, things put in place to disenfranchise black families and black businesses. There was a thriving that happened. This was part of the controversy that was brewing when one of the lawmakers, I believe Byron Donalds down there from Florida, was talking about the strength of the black family during Jim Crow. And people are attacking him, saying that what he was saying was that Jim Crow was good. It's not what he meant. What he was saying was that even in the midst of crushing racism and all of those things around, the black family was so strong and resilient, it actually remained and sustained us as a people. And this is part of what is the messages that we do in that video. And I want to show you one of the clip, because here the dramatization of the movie Claudia, in which Lawrence Hilton Jacobs' character Charles has a confrontation with his mother and her boyfriend, who's present at the time, again played by James Earl Jones. Check it out.
Yeah, man, you say something to me. Tell me how niggas supposed to lay back and take shit. Tell me how to sneak around and hide. How to sit up like some goddamn dog begging when welfare ladies come around. Come on, tell me all about that, Mr. Garbage Man. Charles!
In that very powerful scene where Diane Carroll's character slaps Lawrence Hilton Jacobs for his outburst, she has been expressing her frustration and fear because she feels like she's losing her son. Now, that scene takes place in a kind of clubhouse. There's a group that Charles, the character, has joined as an activist group in the community, and they are disrupting the peace. They are actually going out. They've made signs, and they are staging now a demonstration. And the signs, you got to go and see the movie yourself. 1974, Claudine, starring Diane Carroll, James Earl Jones, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs. The signs that they make are, they read, "Work, not welfare. We demand jobs." Again, some 11 years after the March on Washington in 1963, Dr. King by Rustin, where it was a demonstration, it was a march for jobs and civil rights. The civil rights was about also jobs, having access in employment, in which, particularly because of Jim Crow, black people were being shut out. Here, 11 years later, this particular show, these young people, and it's set in Harlem, they are protesting for jobs. The welfare state has, in the movie, gutted their communities in terms of industrial work, in terms of jobs, in terms of retail work, those types of things. Jobs are gone, and what has replaced it is money from the government. As a matter of fact, Charles, as the character, tells his mother, "Sometimes I feel like I start crying for no reason." He's talking out about a depression and a frustration in which he knows he is being targeted as a black young man, and he's wanting to do something about it. And part of his frustration is that his father's not in his life. Diane Carroll's character asks Roop, her name is Rupert, Roop is his short name, Roop. James L. Jones's character, he says, "Say something to him. Say something to this boy. Could you reach him?" Right? Powerful. And what it's depicting at that time is what was actually going on in urban cities across the country, in which the welfare state was gutting the life of those communities. And this is what's being depicted here. One of the reasons why that scene is powerful is that it delves into young Charles's psyche. He's explaining what he feels and why. He's explaining where he is and how he is now turning into this activist group to actually try to change what's happening in the community. And so in the video, you'll see it on there. I recommend watch the movie, right? Check out some of the good times. I'll say this last thing about the good times part of it, without staying too much on it. The new one with Netflix, again, not a fan at all. I have written about that. If you want to read an article, I'll place it on the Dumisani one as well. I wrote it in my role as the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel CEO and founder, and we actually discuss it there. But maybe we'll make a copy of it and put it there as well, because you can go to that other Substack, ibsi.substack.com. Or just go to ibsi.org, click on Africa Israel Weekly. You can read about that too. Our thoughts on that, in which the newer Good Times is a mockery of what the original was in terms of an intact home and family. This is of the utmost importance today, not just for the black community that has been so strong and has been so, again, I love my community, and I love the fact that all that we have faced as a people, we continue to be strong, even in the midst of all of the chaos and confusion that's always trying to come at. And this is the context in which, when we're talking about the Israel part of it, which we'll cover again in our last segment here. But let me just kind of foreshadow that here before we go to our other short break. There's a reason why Israel's enemies have sought to exploit the black community, in particular Black American and then African as well, when it comes to the demonization of and the propagandizing of what we often call the Israeli-Arab conflict or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's a reason why, and some of them may seem obvious to some at some point, but again, in my book, Zionism and the Black Church, we delve deeper into that. And what does that have to do with the Black Fathers thing? It is a situation in which the black family and black leaders are often accosted, even with issues that have nothing specifically or directly to do with the black community. Our blackness, if you will, is often pilfered by those who have their own agenda that has nothing to do with the strengthening and the moving forward of the black community. They're wanting to use the black community. And this is what I talk about in my book as well. Because of that voice, there's a reason why the black leaders, not even before the whole civil rights movement, they would be sought out for their thoughts on different issues of the day, education, and not just civil rights itself, but other things that would impact home, family. This is part of the reason why, for example, when Dr. King spoke for the vast majority of the civil rights movement in defending Israel's right to defend itself and called for a Marshall Plan for the Arabs who were dispossessed because of those wars, Dr. King and the civil rights movement just did not blame Israel for what was going on. This war had started because as Israel established itself as an independent state, the Arab nations around, particularly the Arab League, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and others came against Israel to snuff it out. And what we're dealing with to this day is the same fight, though with different iterations. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, all of those things. And from that time, black leaders, both in the United States and in Africa, were sought after in terms of their thoughts, their sentiment. It's as if there was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, both sides, and both sides wanted black leaders to speak out on their behalf. The challenge was that Israel was defending itself against the terrorism that then and still seeks to destroy it. And unfortunately, even the Palestinian people, often manipulated by these different forces in terms of money, the United Nations and human rights organizations that do anything but actually observe human rights and human rights abuses, that even for some of those Arab Palestinian voices that would even want peace, those voices would get snuffed out because there's this machine that actually exists. Again, we will touch on this in the African Jewish part of it, because I want to just set it up for you. We would deal with these, we meaning our other organization, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, we would deal with these issues, different compartments of the same issue, right? The black community, black fathers, black mothers, families, businesses, history, all those types of things, because all of those things are relevant when you are discussing things like a geopolitical conflict, whether that's in Israel or the Christians that are being slaughtered in Nigeria. We talked about in the past how there has not been a concerted Black American voice when it comes to Africa since Rwanda, 1994, the genocide that happened there. It's been several decades in which there has been almost a void when it comes to organized black voices in terms of what's going on the continent. And this was something that it's not uncommon. For those of you young people who might be saying, oh, well, what black Americans have to do with Africa? We have always, as a people, had our eye. There were black people in Chicago, in Harlem, and other cities who signed up to help fight against the fascist incursion into Ethiopia from Italy. Even that time, you had black folks who wanted to help defend what they called the Abyssinian Empire, what they called about the Ethiopian, the nation of Ethiopia, as you had Italy coming in and wanting to colonize this in the early 1900s. You had black folks actually signing up to fight to defend. So this is nothing new, right? What's newer now, unfortunately, is a lot of the antipathy between the black American and the African communities. And we'll unpack that too. I know I keep saying that, but we're going to have some time to unfold these things and really delve into it, which is why we had to call it Truth to Power, right? It's not that we think we have a market on truth, but we want to be able to interject some truth into some of these issues and concerns that oftentimes just get, again, propagandized, they get politicized and then used for whatever purposes, but the truth of those things is often missing. So one more break and we're going to deal with the African Jewish Alliance. Stay tuned. Hey, if you are a business or a nonprofit and you want to know about purchasing ad time or underwriting whole or part of an episode of Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington, we would love to hear from you. Just email us at info@ttplive.com, info@ttplive.com, Truth to Power Live. And we would love to hear from you, connect with you. Our sales and marketing team has been assembled and they are prepared to offer all types of creative plans for you, whether for your business, again, for your nonprofit, in which we can partner with you and doing this work here together. We, again, love to hear about what you're doing and love to see how we can partner together. info@ttplive.com. Thanks a lot.
You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington.
Welcome back to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. I am your host, Dumisani Washington. You go to ttplive.com, of course, and learn more about it here. This is our first show together. Again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. We said that in this last segment, we would deal with Israel, Africa, and particularly this African Jewish Alliance. As a matter of fact, that is an organization, AfricanJewishAlliance.org. You can go on that website. It is an alliance of African nationals and Israeli and American Jews who have come together to combat the scourge of extremism and religious violence that impacts both communities in a very, very specific way. October the 7th, 2023, for those of you who are unaware, the terrorist organization known as Hamas infiltrated the Jewish state of Israel from the southern region, which is where Gaza borders Israel, slaughtered some 1,200 to 1,300 Israelis and kidnapped another 200 plus. We know of the fact that there's still another 100 that are unaccounted for, still there in Gaza, who are being held captive by Hamas. I say unaccounted for, that there's the hope and the prayer that they are still alive. We are not certain. And so the war that was renewed, I should say it that way, against Hamas and Israel was shortly after October 7th. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, they are there attempting to both eliminate Hamas, the terrorist organization, and also extract their refugees. And just about a week or two ago, they found 4 who are alive in the stronghold of Rafah. And there's a great celebration with that. Hamas is a terrorist organization that brutally oppresses its own people, the people of Gaza, as well as seeking to kill Israeli men, women, and children. It was a horrific thing that had happened there on October the 7th. And though some of the world has either moved on or has just simply demonized Israel, it is still ongoing. Not only that, many people aren't aware of the fact that shortly after, or right around the same time that Hamas was invading Israel, October the 7th, and causing the carnage and the damage that it did there, the terrorist organization known as Hezbollah to Israel's north, Lebanon, which is both organizations very much controlled by the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is the puppet master, if you will. And as my friend Eric Steckelbeck at TBN says, it is a ring of fire around Israel, enemies that are surrounding the nation. Both the northern and southern regions of Israel are virtually uninhabitable. Tens of thousands of Israelis are internally displaced because of the terrorist threat, both in the north and in the south. This is happening as we speak. Bombs and missiles that are being launched from Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, and on and on. Iran itself, for the first time since the Iranian Republic took over in 1979, attacked the Jewish homeland, sending some, I believe, 200 missiles, drones, and strikes. It was nothing but a miracle that 99% of those drones and missiles and what have you did not cause any damage there. But the fight goes on. The African Jewish Alliance was formed by both African nationals, again, and Israeli Jews and American Jews, who again are facing this extremist threat. It is Islamist extremist threat. We are careful to say that because just like Hamas, when it invaded, killed Israeli Jews, Christians, and Muslims, as well as foreign nationals that were there. We've talked much about, for example, Joshua Malau, I think I'm saying his name correctly. He's one of 2 Tanzanian students that were killed by Hamas, the terrorists there on that day, brutally murdered, brutally executed, stabbed, shot. The video, we even shared the video at first, but so gruesome. We took it back down. Also, some people contacted us, the family of those young men, particularly of Joshua. It was just gut wrenching. My son's name is Joshua, and every time we wrote something about what was going on, we felt that there. And again, there are innocent Palestinians. There are people there for years under the boot of Hamas, and we recognize that yes, Hamas is an elected party that is there. The vast majority of Palestinians in Gaza and in what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, are for what happened on October 7th and want to see more. So when we say those ones who are quote unquote innocent or don't want to see that, it's a small percentage, but they do exist, right? But even if they were a larger percentage, Hamas has an iron grip on Gaza, just as the Palestinian Authority has an iron grip on the Arabs of the West Bank or of Judea and Samaria. So what we recognized after the attack of October the 7th, and this was identified by both Israelis and Africans, that an October 7th massacre, slaughter, continued genocide happens every week in an area like Sudan, where millions have been displaced over decades of fighting with Islamist terrorist organizations, Janjaweed and other organizations that are killing either African Christians, African just non-Muslims, or Muslims who are not aligned with the terrorist ideology. The same thing is happening in Nigeria, Boko Haram. You may remember the whole Bring Back Our Girls. This was back in, I believe, 2014 when Boko Haram, the terrorist organization, had abducted some 200 plus Nigerian girls in the Chibok region. Most of them never returned. There was a few who had, some who are still gone to this day. There is one of the groups in the African Jewish Alliance is a group that's called Leah. It's named for a young lady who was abducted years ago. I think it's the 10-year anniversary of her abduction. She has refused to renounce her Christian faith, and so was told by the terrorist organization apparently that they would release her if she would renounce. She has not renounced, and she is still there, both holding on to her faith in Jesus and also refusing to in any way, in that sense, cooperate as much as she possibly can avoid it where Boko Haram is concerned. This terrorism continues. And just like the United Nations, unfortunately, often demonizes Israel and ignores other parts of the world where there are true genocides, one of the biggest lies being told, ladies and gentlemen, is that Israel is in Gaza committing genocide against the Palestinians. That is a complete lie. Whatever you may have heard, and we have lots of resources for you. I mean, you can email us. We didn't set up our website that way in terms of a specific Israel part of it and everything. But if you want to go further, if you feel like you want more information, please, by all means, info@ttplive.com. We'll give it to you. Not only is Israel not committing a genocide in Gaza or the West Bank or anywhere else for that matter, Israel is, and I hate to use this word, the most efficient when it comes to eliminating hostiles, eliminating terrorists, and avoiding civilian casualties. Have there been civilian casualties? Yes. Those numbers are difficult to ascertain now because the first reporting of those numbers comes from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is run by, guess who? Hamas. This is a terrorist organization that has been lying about not just this particular war, but for years has been lying about casualties. They have themselves murdered their own people. There was a war that happened, I believe in 2021, in which Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another organization that's there, terrorists, they're dedicated to the destruction of Israel and the destruction of the Jewish people. They launched some 4,000 rockets into Israel from Gaza. About 1,200 of those rockets actually landed in Gaza and harmed or killed Palestinians. That was pretty much ignored, unfortunately, by much of the media. But what was only focused on was Israel's response, which has been the case for a very, very long time. So that has been happening, and that meaning that terrorist threat, those terrorist incursions. And so what you've had now is a forming together of Africans and Jews coming together, the African-Israel Alliance. So I want to share with you part of what that meant. There is a specific, very prolific speaker and writer, Mr. Simon Dang. He is a former slave in Sudan, was freed years ago, has a tremendous testimony. Again, another Sudanese Christian who was enslaved because he was an African Christian by the Arab Muslim groups that were there from a little boy. Again, tremendous stories. Matter of fact, he'll be speaking in our area in North Carolina in a little while, in a few days. Go on the website, ibsi.org, if you want to know more about that as well, ibsi.org/dates. And Simon, who has appeared, has spoken all over the world, and you see some videos of him, Simon Dang, you can check that out as well. He wrote a couple of different articles, and I believe one was in Tablet Magazine, in which Simon Dang, shortly after the attacks in October, traveled to Israel to stand in solidarity with his Israeli brothers and sisters, because as he saw the footage that Hamas itself recorded of slaughtering innocent people, he saw the images of his village that was raided by Islamic terrorists, in which he was separated from his family. Many people died, were slaughtered. The images were the exact same. The same thing has been happening with there's another young man. His name is Stephen Anada. He is Nigerian. And he also wrote in a piece in Newsweek, if you say Stephen Anada, type that in there, you'll see his piece, in which he's questioning where's the outrage about what's been happening to his people there for years now. Sudan, Nigeria, the slaves that are in Mauritania, the slaves, we don't know how many, could be hundreds of thousands, could be 1 million in Libya. And that number actually went to some of the officials that were part of the African Union. The slave trade throughout much of the Arab Muslim world that has been going on for the last 14 centuries. Yes, since Islam began to move from Arabia through the peninsula, through Africa and beyond. This has happened after the death of Muhammad, right? This is one of the worst kept secrets, right? But it's never really discussed, especially when you're talking about on a world stage, the demonization of Israel, right? The safest place in the region for Christians, the safest place in the region for other Muslims. You have a multi-ethnic, pluralistic society that is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is what Dr. King called an oasis of brotherhood and democracy. There in Israel, right? There are Arab Muslim IDF soldiers fighting for their freedom of their own country, fighting against other terrorists who are in Gaza, wanting to destroy them, regardless of whether or not they are Arab Muslim, right? So this is what's happening. The importance of this cannot be overstated in that when one sees the fight against Islamic extremism through this lens of what's happening in Israel is happening in Sudan, is happening in Nigeria, it's happening in other parts of the world. Unfortunately, again, because of propagandized information and politicized information, it doesn't really get dealt with. So part of what is happening now is a coming together, particularly since October 7th, of those individuals, those communities who have been impacted in that way. Had the opportunity to be with my friend again, Eric Steckelback, on Steckelback Tonight, I believe it was, on TBN a few weeks ago. And we talked about this whole thing, how Israel's fight is everyone's fight. It's the free world's fight, whether that's in the West or in parts of Africa in which Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and the Janjaweed, these different Islamist sects, are committing genocide against, particularly, first and foremost, African Christian communities, and then beyond, attempting to establish Islamist rule throughout the region. there is a summit, the first summit of the African Jewish Alliance. For those of you who are in the Washington, D.C. area, let me go ahead and give this plug. I believe it's June the 25th and the 26th. June 25th, my anniversary. June 25th, 26th. On that actual day, my wife and I will be in Washington, D.C. at the first ever summit of the African Jewish Alliance. It's about ending slavery. In that region, it's about bringing awareness to what's going on, both in Israel and around that region, for these people who are fighting against this extremist mentality. If you want to go, it's a free event, but you do have to register. It's 2 days. Again, the 25th and 26th. I believe that's a Tuesday and Wednesday, right? You can go to the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel website, ibsi.org/events, and you'll see it's like a purple and yellow flyer that's there, and you can click on that and you can sign up for both dates, June the 25th and 26th, or one or the other, and we would love to see you there. We're expecting a couple of lawmakers to be there, both sides of the aisle. African speakers will be there. My daughter-in-law, who's a South African national, Olga, will be speaking. I'll be speaking as well. And we're going to, again, in that sense, unpack it, give information to other people, and we're planning the first academic conference that's going to be in the fall. So this is our first public event, if you will, in which we are both inviting other people and providing the information and having that opportunity to really make this issue of those fighting against globally the Islamist violence, particularly the alliance between the Africans and the Israelis, put that more on the forefront as we're raising our voices together. And our organization will also be telling and eliciting the help and the voices of more and more Black American pastors who many are not aware, and we are making them aware of these issues here, why they are so crucial. For me, ladies and gentlemen, my personal journey, as we started off talking today in our short time here, we only have an hour together, long before I was doing anything where Israel was concerned, Israel and Africa and all of those things, years before, as a Christian pastor, I began to research. I found out about the persecution of the church. Christians who were dying for their faith in different parts of the world. As a matter of fact, I was first exposed to that in college in the 1980s when a friend of mine traveled to Eastern Europe and saw the devastation of some of the Christian communities there, came back and told me about it. And it wasn't up on at that time in my early 20s that I was even aware, it wasn't even on my radar until then. So from that time, I have been aware, been following Christian organizations like Voice of the Martyrs and Persecuted Church. And so it was in the 90s, the early to mid 90s, that I became aware of the Darfur region in Sudan and what was happening, again, how millions displaced, hundreds of thousands slaughtered, and this has been going on for a very long time. Sudanese Christians, animists, other religious sects who are being, still to this day, even though there's a North and a South now, still there's the eruption of violence that continues to seek to rid the land of anyone who is not part of this Islamist mindset and sect. That was, for me, at that time in my 20s, in the 1990s, I was dealing with this issue, then wrapping my head around it. And then it's funny, the internet was a newer thing then, I guess, in the late 90s, in the sense of being able to both get information and share and everything. And that was then I began to write letters to who were our representatives. I was living in California, Barbara Boxer, who was a senator, the late Dianne Feinstein, our senator at the time. I may have written one or two letters to the State Department. And again, I wasn't part of an organization. This is the 1990s. There was no... I didn't know about, at that moment, Voice of the Martyrs. That came out there later on. So I'm just doing this on my own because as God is kind of leading me to do it, right? So I'm writing these letters. I'm giving this information. Well, as I'm kind of trying to immerse myself in what's happening, what's going on, who the players are on the ground. Fast forward a few years later, when I am involved in Israel advocacy, when I am involved in the whole Israel Africa part, one of the things that happened around 2013 or so, there was controversy around Sudanese and Eritrean refugees who had fled their countries, made it to Israel, and there was a lot of talk in periodicals like I'm dating myself. Sites like Al Jazeera and these sites that are extremely anti-Israel, extremely anti-Semitic, they're completely talking about the struggles and the trials and the difficulties and all the negative stuff they can find, and they're talking about how Africans are being treated, quote unquote. Africans are being treated in Israel, how Israel is just a quote unquote racist nation, all these things. So I'm watching these things, and there are definitely some difficulties, particularly in Tel Aviv, some of the poorer sections of Tel Aviv there in Israel. There's all kinds of things that are just exploding. And one of the first things that came to my mind was they're not telling the people how tens of thousands of Sudanese and Eritrean refugees even got to Israel. They wouldn't even mention the fact that Omar Bashir, who was then the dictator of Sudan, was driving these people away, either slaughtering them and giving them absolutely no choice, either convert or die, or just die or be slaves. This was actually what was going on. And these Sudanese and Eritreans for a different reason, right? They were fleeing their country as well. Wasn't the exact same reason. There's a different type of oppression that was there. They're forming these large communities in Tel Aviv, having fled their country and having now living in Tel Aviv and in other parts of Israel. They weren't made official citizens, but they began to set up their communities and shops and daycare centers. And in other words, they are finding asylum in the very Jewish state that's being demonized by the media. And while that same media ignores the slaughtering of these Africans fleeing Sudan in the first place. This was the connection that I had to make when I saw those two seemingly separate issues, the Islamist violence in Africa and the Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad violence against Israel. It's the same mindset. When Boko Haram years ago in Nigeria pledged allegiance to ISIS, which is committed, even just they released a statement about a week or so ago that giving their full-throated support for what's going on with Gaza in terms of Hamas, and it's wanting to destroy Israel. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the spokesmen of Hamas have said, we are going to return to Israel and do October the 7th again and again and again. They're not talking about ceasefire. They're not talking about land for peace. They're not talking about two-state solution. They want Israel gone and Jews slaughtered. And that they have to try and use black leaders to then repeat that whole free Palestine without really understanding what's happening. This has always been the goal. Not that black folks, we're not capable of understanding, more than capable. There is the bait and switch that's actually been going on for a very long time. This started back in the 60s when Yasser Arafat took over the PLO, which we will be talking about that in the weeks to come as well. The African Jewish Alliance was formed to bring not just awareness to this, but ladies and gentlemen, to move legislatively what's going on in these other nations and at the places like United Nations to force them to address this issue that is so prevalent and actually growing. AfricanJewishAlliance.org is where you can go. And again, if you want to go to the conference that's in Washington, D.C., go to ibsi.org/events and sign up there June 25th, 26th. We'd love to see you there.
You're listening to Truth to Power Live
with Dumisani, Washington.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. This first ever edition of Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington. It was great being with you. ttplive.com. See you next week, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern. God bless you, everyone.
Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington.